All right, welcome everyone. All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, wherever you are in our wide world, and welcome to another NetHope webinar. My name is Seth Otto, and I'm the Digital Communications Manager here at NetHope and producer of the NetHope webinar series. We're delighted to be joined today by representatives from NetHope member Food for the Poor and valued NetHope partner Heller Consulting. And today we'll be showcasing the steps taken by Food for the Poor to identify areas for technological enhancement and the steps they plan to take to improve global fundraising and operational efforts. Let's go over a bit of housekeeping before we get started. First off, let's make this webinar interactive. Let us know what comes up for you. Please post your comments and questions in the chat window. The presenters will address them during the question and answer period. And in the hours following the webinar, we will send a follow-up email your way that will include links to the webinar recording, the slides, and any other resources shared during today's presentation and discussion. So please pay attention to your inboxes. And we value your feedback. Your opinion matters to us, and we use your responses to our survey to improve this webinar series for you and our broader NetHope community. It also provides our presenters with an opportunity to connect with you if you want them to. And with all of that out of our way, I would like to welcome today's speakers. We'll be hearing from Jeff Alexander, Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer at Food for the Poor. Jett Winters, Director of Sales and Marketing at Heller Consulting. And by way of introduction, I will now turn things over to Kaya Swift, Director of Marketing at Heller Consulting. Thank you so much. Take it away, Kaya.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Seth, and thank you all for joining us today. As Seth mentioned, my name is Kaya. I'm the Director of Marketing for Heller Consulting. Heller Consulting is a technology strategy and implementation firm, and we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. And as Seth mentioned, we are proud to be a long-term partner of NetHope, and we really enjoy partnering with Seth and the wonderful team over at NetHope to bring you all webinars like the one today. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to my colleague, Jett Winters.
Well, thank you so much, Kaya. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us to share this story with Food for the Poor and the work that Heller Consulting supported them in planning for real change within the organization. And so, to get us started just with introductions, Jeff, maybe you could share an introduction of yourself and your role and a little bit about Food for the Poor.
Sure, thanks, Jett. Named Jeff Alexander. I've been at Food for the Poor for almost 31 years now and have been on the executive team for 5 of them. About 5 years ago, I started as a Chief Outcomes Officer, where I was basically maximizing and looking at operations and improving programmatic outcomes through data. But now I serve as Chief Administrative Officer responsible for finance and data, and was also acting as CIO in charge of technology for the past 3 years. Previous to that, I was financial controller for 20 years. And during this entire time, I've been a project manager for 2 ERP implementations and a survivor of 1 CRM implementation. Oh, so Food for the Poor, yes. So we're operating in about 17 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. That's the region we operate in. And our mission is fairly simple. It's really to help those forgotten by society, those suffering, because that's service to God. So we serve as that link between our like-hearted supporters and the poor. And this all started back in 1982, where we were starting as a relief aid provider through acquisition of goods, whether it's through purchase or through donation, and to provide material assistance to the poor by responding to the local needs of the church and local partners, only to become one of the largest distributors of charitable goods in the region. But over time, we expanded into infrastructure like building houses and school construction, water wells, and clinics. And our overarching goal from our strategic plan is to really facilitate paths out of poverty and into transformed lives, so that we expanded our focus into addressing multidimensional poverty. And this is where we are, and we share many things with NetHope members. And the 10 major programmatic areas that, even though it's Food for the Poor, it's much more than food, is obviously the first is hunger relief and food security. But we also do WASH, agriculture, community development, education, economic empowerment, healthcare, emergency response, outreach to vulnerable groups, and child sponsorship, like many of you all do. Throughout all what we do at Food for the Poor, we're really trying to emphasize the need for operational efficiency across every function, whether it's fundraising or programs or administrative. functions so that we can really maximize the resources that we have so that we can maximize our mission outcomes. And one of the ways we've been doing this over this period of time, especially in the last 5 years, is we've really become a learning organization. Probably one of the main reasons why we joined NetHope and spoke out with consultants like Heller. And we're really focused on maximizing that transformational impact through partnership and examination of those best practices in every function of our operations.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's an amazing career there at Food for the Poor, helping the organization in so many different ways. Just a bit about myself. I'm Jett Winters. I've been with Heller Consulting for about 4 years. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing, but really I'm representing the work of the amazing team we have here at Heller Consulting. Heller's been around for over 25 years, and the technology that nonprofits have been working with over that time has changed dramatically. So what's really core to what Heller does is help organizations understand what their needs are, detail those out, and then go to the marketplace and determine, what are the best solutions to help us accomplish these business needs. And so we do that with our technology planning services and also system implementation when it's time to actually put those tools and solutions in place. We do that with an amazing team across the US and Canada, highly certified folks in project management, change management, the technical certifications they work on. We only work with nonprofit and higher education organizations. And so we're really proud that that's reflected in the team that we have here, and the fact that we're a certified B Corporation and values-driven and DEI-focused organization as well. We're privileged to work with just some amazing organizations, including many NetHope members and other international relief organizations. We've worked with over 10% of the 100 largest US charities over the last 3 years. But really what that allows us to do is understand processes and staff and technology at the most complex scales and bring that expertise to organizations of all sizes. And so we really pride ourselves in being able to tailor our efforts to fit the unique needs of organizations. So just a bit about our journey with Food for the Poor. It really started with Food for the Poor bringing a vision of becoming that best-in-class fundraising and service organization that can, use data to make better decisions. And we'll ask Jeff a bit about how they came to that vision as well. But in terms of setting the stage for the work that we did together, it really started with a discovery effort with Food for the Poor leadership and 6 different departments within the organization to, understand what folks saw as current challenges, what they saw as the areas of greatest opportunity, and start to build a consensus and shared understanding of what it would look like to work better together and to solve those challenges. Together, we were able to create a vision for what's that future state of Food for the Poor? How could it work better? What would that look like in terms of technology, people, and process? And then once you know where you're headed, you can do that gap analysis to understand, what's missing from where we are now to where we want to be. And then finally, once you understand what those gaps look like, you're able to create a pathway, a roadmap to outline what are the specific efforts and projects and steps and considerations that we need to be thinking about to actually get from where we are now to that future state. So with that, I'll start asking Jeff some of these important questions. But really, I wanted to start off just asking, with that bigger picture vision of becoming a best-in-class fundraising service organization, building on the work that you've already been doing, ultimately being able to, drive decisions with real data, putting that in the hands of staff. What does that mean to you, and why was this so important as sort of a North Star guiding our purpose for the assessment?
Like I said, earlier, that we really have always strive to be as efficient as possible. I mean, every NGO is, under the kind of the rubric that we need to do more with less. So we've always operated within that mindset, and it's really trying to obviously maximize those resources being funds, to maximize what we can do for the regions and the poor that we serve. So ultimately, it's really just trying to find the best ways to maximize our reach.
That's great insight, and you know, you do have to maximize the value of the nations you're getting to, you know, do the most that you can with the funds that you have available. You know, maybe you could share a little more in terms of setting the stage for, you know, what your current state looked like before we began talking together, and really what prompted you to say, okay, this is an important project for us to undertake and start this assessment and planning effort to create this longer term vision?
Sure. There's a little bit of kind of our IT history that, you know, Food for the Poor has a large fundraising operation as well as a large programmatic one. So we do everything ourselves. And most of our fundraising, about 90, probably 99% of it is from individual giving. There's a tremendous amount of direct response relationship we have with supporters and donors. And our fundraising efforts, largely over the 40 years of the organization, has been managed on self-made software in a data model that was basically designed back in the 1980s. And that system had a lot of ungoverned data across a few disparate systems. And there was very few controls that really were keeping the data hygiene intact, other than maybe a quick deduping process. But back in 2018, we decided to make the decision to finally move to a more modern mid-level CRM. And that, but we did so in a way to kind of retain as much of the current data model that we had and retain those processes and workflows with as, you know, as much as possible. And it was good intended in order to kind of minimize change and potential impact to the staff at the time. But it basically had unintended consequences where it effectively severed us from some key operational processes and nearly all the native reporting available in that new CRM. So when I took over as Chief Outcomes Officer, we were looking at this, and one of the strategies we developed was to kind of go into creating a data warehouse, or an EDW, to basically help access and govern the CRM data. And it's proved very useful since then in providing some real-time KPI and dashboarding of cleansed results, but self-service reporting still remains difficult, limited, and even that cleansed data only still resides in the data warehouse. So we've not been able to remediate that CRM's data back with the golden records from the EDW. So nearly all the data that drives campaigns and activities still remains ungoverned. So basically our current state is that we're really operating with a lot of apps that we use to keep as minor as possible, but a lot of those apps are kind of integrated with manual or almost semi-automatic integrations. And that is basically, it's done so with a lot of minimal governance, minimal data cleansing. So as a result, every time we try to take a step forward with a new idea, a new opportunity, we have to take 2 steps back because there's so much errors in the data causing, you know, these errors came organically over 40 years of data. And these constant data issues, simple, silly stuff like missing values or incorrectly formatted or standardized data, sometimes even integrations overriding good data. That basically taxes our IS team tremendously and simply prevents us from progressing forward. I mean, our tech debt continues to rise, and it's a major problem that we're dealing with. So ultimately, why we went down this operation and this quest with Heller is to really, we know we need some modern processes. We need to place the way we can engage with supporters better, and to know that there's a lot of structural friction due to our ecosystem that we've developed over the last 40 years. So we sought the assistance of Heller, and to help guide us on the self-examination and provide the recommended path forward.
Yeah, it's such a cruel irony that, you know, our organizations have all this incredible data, and then the challenge is cleaning it up, getting it in a way that's usable, getting it in the hands of the people that, you know, can actually use it at the right times. You know, it sounds like you've done a lot of incredible work to kind of piece together some of these disparate systems, but then as you do that, every next thing requires that next workaround, that next application. And you said the technical debt, you know, just building up of more and more things to maintain over time, and someone has to know all those things too. So maybe you could share a little bit about what the impact would be to Food for the Poor if you can solve some of those challenges and have, a better ecosystem of tools, easier to manage, with really the purpose of putting data in the hands of people that need it, know that it's accurate, and can do something with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the things we're looking forward to, I've mentioned several times already, it's really kind of on my North Stars, again, to maximize what we can do for the poor and through our, to expand our mission through the acquisition of resources. So that system that we're trying to modernize really needs to be agile. And especially in this volatile world we're living in, where change is coming at us from different directions much more rapidly than it has in the past. Necessitates us to be able to change quickly, and our current systems just simply cannot do that for us. So, changing to a better, more modern system or ecosystem will really help, provide us that well-engineered integration of systems and apps, so that we finally have that true system, single system of record that can provide those truths and insights that we can quickly and reliably access. And and more importantly, it's one of our founding principles is that we also want to really enhance the collaboration between departments and those functions that they interrelate with through well-flowing data and those shared common data attributes, so that we can improve the accountability of donors' gifts all the way from the first gift to the very last mile of support. And for the technical side, and really also we were looking for a system that gives us that control of data. Is much of an automated process. Right now, again, before I was saying that a lot of the things we're doing, even from the integration and the movement of data, is still very manual. So these kinds of things, we need to have a much more robust, standardized process to handle them. And ultimately, I mean, the end goal is to really wish that I have for the fundraising and marketing teams is to enable them to really think more and to really relate better and more naturally with supporters, and allow hopefully the data and the systems to support that. And most importantly is really to move our tech teams from a process fixed mode that they're constantly in, really to kind of creating new programmatic innovations to expand the mission, pay down that tech debt, and really kind of use technology, the mantra of NetHope, to use technology to solve problems.
I mean, it would make a tremendous transformational impact on the organization.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's really interesting about these types of planning engagements is, Heller can bring some expertise about tools and technology that's available, some best practices about what other organizations are doing, but it's really you and the folks at Food for the Poor that understand, your constituents and how you're going to serve them and what resonates to raise money and how the organization is currently working. And so we really need to get from you that depth of expertise and foundation of what's going on with the organization today and where are the places to focus on. And so as you started this process, who was important for you to include in that discovery process? What voices did you really want to make sure were contributing?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is every level of stakeholder. When you study and you speak to other consultants about just big project implementations, usually the biggest factor that they claim is they make sure you get executive sponsorship, because that's going to be a key driver to moving a project forward. And I really think it kind of depends on your culture. And our culture, I'm going to say a lot, but many large programs or projects or ideas tend to come down from the executives. So that being said, they already have these executive sponsorship up front, but we do need to get is true stakeholder and team member buy-in to these different ideas, to make sure that they also agree with the direction of the strategy, so that it will really help basically but really maximize your chance of success. Otherwise, you're going to build resistance, either upstream or downstream, depending on your culture, without getting true buy-in from every stakeholder.
Yeah, that stakeholder engagement is really important. It's it's part of your change management journey in getting those voices early, kind of capturing what they're seeing, but part of it's just getting good information. And so when we actually did discovery with Food for the Poor, it was pretty broad and we had to get pretty deep in the types of things that we were learning. And so let's look a little bit at that overview of what we uncovered in discovery. You know, some of the things we were talking about is, how you're currently operating, what systems you currently have, where are they integrated, what is the, data, how is it flowing between different systems? Is that a formal integration, or is that a manual process that, when something's not working, you just have to throw a person at it for a few hours to do that task every week? Even what data lives in each system, what do you have data in systems that is overlapping or duplicative or just different because it gets entered in different ways? And that can lead to some different pain points that you described already. But people are always ready to share their pain points in a discovery process. They know what's not working. But then part of that's also flipping and making sure we're uncovering, well, what is really working though? Because you don't want to lose some of the things that you have put in place that are really enabling and empowering the team. So any changes that you're making, you want to make sure you carry what's working forward. And then also, talk through with folks where they think things can be optimized. Where do they see improvements? Where do they see the biggest impact? Because that's all input to creating this kind of bigger picture vision. And so, some of the findings that came out of this broad-based discovery was really summarizing some of what you shared, that the organization was kind of stuck in being a little reactive and not able to be completely proactive. And so some of the challenges with that, and Kaya, you can lead us to the next slide here, is that you ended up with different sources of truth across systems, with the CRM data being sort of separate from other systems. That can make cross-functional collaboration challenging, because depending on what system you use, you may be seeing different information. There was challenges with manual work when you don't have systems that can build in automation. Everything has to be done manually. When you have integrations that, or lack of integrations, you might be moving data manually. And so just a sense that things are taking longer than they should. Reporting becomes challenging. If different data in different places have different data models, or you don't have the data hygiene that you need, that can be challenging. And then, people are pulling different reports and maybe the data doesn't agree. And then that can lead to, disagreements just because people are relying on different things to make decisions. And then mention this a bit too, that, because you moved into a system that was sort of separate, your fundraising processes themselves kind of got stuck at a period in time too. And so, really not being able to take advantage of the way, the most modern fundraising offices are perhaps working. And so with all of that as background, did any of that sound surprising to you? Was it surprising to other folks on the staff? Or, was this things you already knew and felt? Perhaps this was just sort of echoing back what people kind of already knew.
Yeah, I mean, the findings, funny enough, it's like you get used to the pain that you deal with day in and day out from your typical operating process. So, like, again, a lot of the things we do, they were, slowly grown and developed over decades. So, what we do in many areas from a fundraising perspective are just things that we've gotten used to doing in a certain way. So that when you come in, and especially with the root causes and some of those, the different consequences, it basically shines light on things that we've either kind of known, but, haven't really been fully aware of. So that it closely affirmed what we kind of inherently knew in all those different areas. But that it really kind of put a good focus on the fact that data and just the handling of data was a major cause and major root problem of the issues that we're having. So it really kind of helped us illuminate those significant areas that we can solve and the various components that would be required to solve it. But surprise-wise, yeah, no, there weren't so much of surprise, but they were just very good affirmations, indicators, and descriptors of those pain points or the things that we've been tolerating for such a long period of time.
Yeah, I think that's right. It really can kind of vocalize what, maybe bubbling up in different scenarios across the organization, but really understanding that, oh, there's something root cause here, something, more core that we can actually solve, and it will benefit, things even more broadly. Getting those pain points out is super important, but then building a consensus around what a future vision might look like is really the next critical step. And so, one of the ways that Heller organizes our thoughts on creating that future vision is recognizing that, change doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so, oh, maybe we're talking about changing a piece of technology, but when you do that, your business processes change, your staff have to change, whether that's training or maybe you need a new person or a new role or expertise there. And so, we really try to make sure we're centering your goals. And then as we think about what you're going to have to go through to make some broader change, recognizing there's actually these interconnected areas that we have to be thinking about, because that's how we're going to get to that future vision. As we started to develop that future state with you, we really wanted to move to this proactive, self-driven, data-driven decision-making model where, technology worked for folks and processes were kind of built around what impact they need to make, rather than having to work around tools that maybe weren't working together super well. And so, some of the things that we started to uncover for that future vision was having that data model that was going to structure your data in a way that you can have a single source of truth, a single source for reporting, that would make it easier for departments to collaborate, with data flowing more easily between departments, with better automation that sort of builds in your business practices. So it's easier for folks to, comply with those effectively, making their day easier. And that, really you can be that modern fundraising and marketing organization, rather than having to have your processes stuck with, this is just the way the tools work. You could actually do what's most efficient and most effective. And so as we sort of built that shared vision of a future state with you and the team at Food for the Poor, how did that resonate with you? Did that give, words to a vision that folks could get behind?
Yeah, no, for sure, and especially the root cause. I mean, I've heard people mention this in just conversation, the whole idea of being proactive and not reactive. And you start thinking about, what does that really mean for us? I mean, everything we have within our, what we used to call the donor system, or our CRM, are kind of just pieces, almost like a Frankenstein of systems where a new idea, a new thing pops up. Oh, we're going to go into digital, for example, 15, 20 years ago. What do we need to do that? I don't know. So we just kind of tacked on processes and data elements to our data structure and just kind of try to reuse what we can. And if we couldn't do it, we just let that division do what they need to do in their system. So again, it kind of put a light on the ways we've been behaving and operating, such that we had a lot of these disparate systems and disparate databases that had data in them that was hugely valuable to potentially another area that we just could not access, because all we were really syncing back and forth were just transactions. So everything from an integrative perspective was just on a transactional level. So really, again, it helped highlight some of the things we just didn't realize were there, some of those inherent truths. And then I think it's really helped people to understand some of these why things are so frustrating, why things take a long time to change or develop, and why we can't move as quickly forward as we want to. And there's really starting to embrace that idea of just trying to get that modern best-in-class ecosystem, I should say, because I think there's lots of ways you can kind of define and shape it, but they know that we definitely need some more modern practices in our operation.
I love how you described that when something, doesn't just work with what you had, you would just let the department go off and, get their own tool or, do their own thing. And, sometimes people end up liking that, right? Because then, even though they recognize that might cause some other problems, then they just get to do whatever they want with their own thing,
Right.
even, if organizationally there's all this other, downstream effects. And so, maybe with that, I'll ask, did this process help you gain some organizational buy-in for why, that might not
Mhm.
be the best path?
Yeah, no, it does, because even again before, we was saying earlier with the findings, that it kind of affirmed a lot of things we thought. But depending on the voice and who's saying it internally, a lot of times I almost use like the parent versus friend metaphor, that sometimes it's easier to hear it from friend, the truth, than hear it from your parent. So if a manager or somebody else who may see the problem is trying to explain it, I think the buy-in is better when you have a neutral third party coming in to basically, with industry experience especially, to present those same issues. Like, well, okay, I've heard it already. Now my friend, whomever they may be, is affirming the same thing. All right, well, it's got to be a real problem. So that's really kind of helped quickly transform and give direction to everybody, so that they all kind of sense that urgency that we've been trying to push towards change. So that the entire organization is understanding it and really getting into it, because it's ultimately these kinds of projects. I mean, they're not IS solutions; they are organizational solutions. So you really have to get the entire organization to buy into this. And ultimately, again, especially the findings and the prospective solutions are giving us hope and a roadmap, towards, you see the light of the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Um, Well, you did that transition for me perfectly as we move into talking about how we developed that action plan. It's funny how you shared. Sometimes it's just easier to hear it from the friend, the somebody on the outside, and um, it's really a reflection of how this process can build confidence in a set of recommendations for an organization, because as they move through this process, starting with that discovery and current state analysis, folks feel heard. They are able to sort of share more freely. Maybe they're sharing feedback that they wouldn't share if somebody internally was asking these types of questions. And then, as we start to develop that gap assessment and say, oh, this is where we're headed, but and this is what we're seeing that's missing, they can start to see their own problems be solved as part of that. And so then as we develop that action plan, that's really, how do you get from your current state to the future state? What are the individual projects that have to happen? They, now feel like they've been a part of that process, so that when those projects actually come to pass, they're more engaged and ready to move forward on them. And I'll share a little bit about the roadmap we helped put together and some of the elements of it. One of the critical projects was designing that new data model. Really, you had done some of this work as you developed the data warehouse, but really recognizing the need for a structure that all of your systems could align with, that you could use as the foundation for Food for the Poor, saying, this is how we look at our data, this is how we define things, this is how we're going to structure it, and the data governance that's going to make sure that data adheres to it and you have the data hygiene you need to leverage that data. Is just a critical foundational effort, regardless of what systems you end up using. But then I think there's also recognition that some of the technology needs to change itself. And so looking at some of those systems, determining what functionality you really need out of each of them and what path you're going to take, that could mean, a new suite of systems in some of the critical areas, whether that's changes and upgrades to existing ones or wholesale adoption of potentially a new platform, really looking at, what are you using for your CRM and integrated marketing solutions, or CDP and data segmentation and digital fundraising and the ERP, and making sure that as you make selections and adopt those, that you have a plan for implementing them, because these are not quick changes. These are not, you do all this work in a year. It's really a multi-year plan. And so then we tried to outline what that digital transformation would look like over a 3-year period. And so we can see in the next slide that, we really outlined 4 phases of implementation that would take place over the course of 3 years. And really recognizing that during that whole time, Food for the Poor still has to do its important work every single day, even as it goes through this major transformation. And so trying to be really thoughtful about how to organize these efforts in a way that are executable and don't overwhelm the organization, but also prioritize the impact that these changes would make, so that you're doing the most important things first and doing them in a logical way, so that these efforts sort of build on each other. And so we were able to leave you with a vision for how you might undertake a change of this scale over this time period, and really outlining each step along the way. But really, once that plan is in your hands, it is yours, right? It is yours to kind of take under consideration, think through what you've learned, look at this vision we've put together, and start to go, okay, where can we start to focus, and how are we going to start tackling it? And so I want to ask you about, how did having this action plan in hand allow you to start moving forward? And maybe, what's been your focus since you've gotten that plan? Where are you kind of organizing the organization around, and really starting to spend your time?
No, like, it's good that's called a roadmap, right? Because it's kind of like that, there's sometimes multiple angles and multiple ways to get to the end, but at least it gives you this kind of a templated path of things that we need to do in the somewhat of a sequence. But that sequence was very helpful, because it really, again, reaffirmed the need to focus in on the current data structures, that we truly understand what we're dealing with across our organization, across the different functions. And what we've done is we actually created a very large scale project that the organization has bought into. We've called it Operation Data Storm. And it's really bringing in teams of stakeholders across the organization, from IS, from fundraising, from admin and programs, to do many things. I mean, it's kind of like a multi-front, multi-pronged approach, where one of the areas, especially with the multiple stakeholders and team members, is we need to get down into just the data itself, and define those data elements, so that we're all talking the same thing, and start to create those policies of standardization, so that, again, when we refer to certain elements and the way things are being recorded and captured, it's common across the different divisions and different areas of Food for the Poor. And that's invariably, and without a doubt, going to spread into some redesigning of existing operating procedures, which is ultimately, we're trying to make those collaborations and the usage of the data much more cohesive, much more collaborative. And from a technical standpoint, our IS teams during this time, they're also developing better true automations, and data structures to govern the data and integrate apps that we have across our ecosystem, so the data flow is coming in both cleansed and standardized before it enters our system of record. Right now, it's coming in pretty much raw, and we're cleansing it and refining it post-posting, if you will, whether it's some limited basis in the CRM, mostly being cleansed in the data warehouse. But again, I was saying before, the data warehouse cleansed data is not coming back into the system of record, so that all that data being used is still being used in a very kind of uncleansed, ungoverned manner. So it creates those issues and problems. And even when you're in audit steps, you're talking about auditing the current systems and kind of identifying those gaps, in the more of a deep down discovery manner. We're very kind of a change to our roadmap ideas, but we're very pleased that our current CRM provider has basically stepped up, and they're going to assist us with auditing those gaps that we currently have in the CRM, and they're going to actually redeploy our system to properly map the old data model that we kind of asked them to put in for us, that 35-year-old data model, and kind of apply it to their native data structure. So that if anything, we're going to have a much more stable system, stable environment, that we can see looking at the roadmap again, whether it's now, even after that's done for a very small cost and hopefully a very quick time, to see that, okay, well, do we still need another CRM? Can we reliably basically expand our ecosystem with other apps and other integrations? And if that's the case, either way, at least we know that, the plan of action, and it should be much easier, much more kind of a more reliably way to do that, to move that data over. Now that data is kind of been restructured and being governed on a day-to-day basis. And then really, hopefully, again, going back to that technological debt, we can start implementing other things that we've been waiting on, things like ERP, which our current system is quite old. It's about 13, 14 years old. So it's dying to be refreshed and upgraded. But we have to kind of start from the basics and looking at the data itself and building from that. So hopefully through these kinds of early steps and through Operation Data Storm, we can kind of buy ourselves and accelerate that timeline so that we can start paying down the other tech debt that we have been accumulating.
Yeah, I think it's a great insight that the roadmap and the action plan that you have, is meant to be responded to, and that, as where you're trying to head, if a new opportunity comes up or a new change comes up to it, that you're able to adjust, look at how it would affect the rest of the plan, and still be on the path to keep moving forward and get to the ultimate goal. So I love that and love some of the work that you're doing. I also love the insight, some of these efforts are, very technical. It's about the data hygiene and how it's moving into the data warehouse. But then there's this other piece that I think you've got nailed down, which is getting people energized and excited and on board with this project. And so naming the project and, Operation Data Storm, and getting folks, engaged and excited to be a part of it is just as important as the very technical details that you will inevitably have to address as you do it as well. So maybe I'll step back, and just start to ask a couple questions of general advice that you might have for other folks. You've seen technology adoption through on big scales in the past. I'm sure some have been very successful, some maybe weren't as successful as you hope. Maybe you can share just what your thoughts are around what makes technology deployment successful or maybe not as successful. What should people be thinking about?
Again, opening description, I've been through 2 ERPs and 1 CRM implementations. It's not my first rodeo on these kind of things. And from the successes and failures, you really, even though from an ERP or a CRM perspective, you need to understand yourselves and the current state that you're having in. And obviously the data kind of defines that state. So you really need to understand and how the data operates and throughout the organization. And if you don't have the means of controlling it, even if it's inefficient, to work on that control and understanding. And then once you do that, once you have that level of control, then you need to kind of align again what you have, what you're bringing in to what you have, so that you can identify those gaps. And then because that gap may require additional development or additional apps to fill in what you're trying to get done, because you're never gonna know everything, but you want to at least prepare yourselves with your data to be able to kind of leverage new ideas, new innovations as the marketplace designs them. And I've heard this from ERP consultants, and I could attest to its validity, but you really want to minimize customization and stick with configuration within the native systems and apps that you're bringing in. And sometimes that kind of dictates just which direction you want to go in, whether you're going to go through a more of a single system ecosystem like a Salesforce or a Microsoft world, or do you want to go into the app integrative world where you're just picking and choosing the right pieces for the right functions. But ultimately, you don't want to customize any of that, because customization invariably does 2 things that we've experienced. It increases the difficulty of support, sometimes even makes it impossible. And then it also creates instability of your systems due to the inevitable forgotten process or dysfunctional workflow that you've just coded into fact, and or sometimes even just bad code.
I think it's great advice. The thinking through your technology approach that you just described, whether you're doing something more platform based like a Salesforce or Microsoft, or, sort of, we might call it best in breed, where it's individual solutions that are sort of built for a purpose. We've seen organizations be very successful in both models. They just come with different considerations, a different way that you then have to support them and you have to manage them. And yeah, what level of, how what depths of customization do you consider as, true development on top of a solution versus, a customization that's, reasonable within the code. And so, you know, it's great advice and something for organizations to really think through what their total picture of working with a solution would look like. Maybe I'll end with asking you, for folks that perhaps saw some of their own organizational challenges in some of the findings we shared, but their solution may not be the solution that that we ended with for Food for the Poor, the path that you're moving down. What advice might you have for those organizations thinking about developing their own plan?
Like I was saying, start with what you know. I mean, really, you look at yourselves, look at your own data, your processes, your workflows, map it out, discuss it to find out even just inherently if there's an inefficiency that you can solve just procedurally, not through technology. And then, from that, you also want to identify your KPIs, your financial measures and your productivity measures to make sure that whatever system you're migrating to or that you're trying to solve for, you can monitor that progress and those results. Internally, we also had to look at our skills and capacity. I mean, you may not have a very large, we certainly don't, large technical team. So it depends on what you're able to, Jett, to what you were saying. I mean, it depends on what you're able to handle. So that is a best in breed multi-app ecosystem. Can you maintain that? Do you have the skills to develop and maintain the integrations? Or do maybe you also need a data warehouse, you need some database administrators and things like that. Or do you want to rely on third parties that can build within an ecosystem like a Salesforce or Microsoft or a combination thereof? So there's lots of different, I think, a lot of different ways you can do it, but you just have to have the entire capacity to manage it because, there's pros and cons to either one. And probably the final thing I'd probably say is what we've done a lot of in the past 3 years, especially with NetHope, is really to seek the counsel of friends, like the members of NetHope. I mean, I've done a lot of asking the people that know me from a lot of the meetings. I've constantly asked what's happening with them, what implementations are doing, because we want to learn as well. We want to, share the successes and share the pains, but also, working with the, supportive consultants of NetHope like Heller, people who know our constraints and our environment. You want to basically learn as much as you can from those that have come before us. So I'll basically leave you at that.
Well, thank you so much for that, Jeff. And the folks on this call are already taking that advice of seeking the counsel of friends by hearing from you and the story of Food for the Poor. Kaya, I believe you're going to share some of the questions that folks have been asking throughout the presentation.
Yeah, so Seth has been putting some reminders in the chat, but please, if you have any questions for Jeff or for Jett, please pop those in the chat and we can ask them live here. While we wait for some of those questions, I have a couple of questions for you, Jeff, as I've been listening to you. You were just talking about, thinking through the capacity of your organization internally. And I was wondering how you think about training, whether that's training your staff on a large scale change, like going to a new CRM, going to a new ERP, but even just adding a new, email marketing solution or something like that can require some training. So from, the leadership standpoint, how do you think about budgeting for the time and the resources to make sure that the staff is up to speed on the new technology?
No, we've done, especially with new technology, we've taken multiple approaches to training. Sometimes we try to minimize it and go down the self-learning route. Other times we've kind of bought into structured training and just making sure, at least from an application standpoint, that we learn as much as possible. And, more times than not, the structured training is imperative. And it has to be part of your investment. And obviously the ongoing training, but even more so, that's just kind of the new skills, right? You also need to understand the kind of ecosystem you're building to make sure you have the right skills and training to support it. So, we're looking at just technical skills, whether it's, people to do API integrations, whether it's database managers and administrators, things like that, where you can, you can basically take control of your ecosystem yourself. Otherwise, you're always going to be reliant on third party or your software vendors, and they are more expensive in the big picture, but you're gonna rely on that ecosystem. If that works for you, great. But that's the kind of capacity and skills examination you have to kind of conduct.
Mhm. That's wonderful advice. The other thing I was wondering about too is you mentioned that, you're looking forward to your staff getting out of sort of a fix-it mode and allowing them to have more time to think strategically, think more broadly about the impact and expanding programs and things like that. For you personally, kind of going through this project and looking forward, what are you most excited about when you're thinking about what's possible with some of this transformation?
Yeah, no, I think I was saying before, the biggest thing I'm really envisioning for Food for the Poor is to truly be in that innovative space where we are starting to think of, okay, well, there's a thing we need to do, a way to do it that could be better, that we could design the better app or a better technological process to facilitate, especially from the programmatic side. So much of our energy is really just trying to fix the data that is coming into our system. And we don't have enough time to spend on trying to improve the interventions and the programs through technology and data. So making that pivot and that transition is really exciting for us.
This is fantastic. Just checking the chat here one more time, but I think we can start wrapping up here with about 5 minutes left to the top of the hour.
Great.
Let's see. There you go. Jett, you want to close us out?
Yeah, well, I'll just thank everyone again for attending. I'll thank Seth and the amazing folks at NetHope for hosting us and allowing us to have this conversation. Jeff and Food for the Poor, thanks so much for working together with on this effort, but really, being able to share this story and for the benefit of the rest of the NetHope community. It's been great partnering with you on this, and today's conversation has been fantastic as well. If you'd like to continue the conversation, myself and the team at Heller are always happy to connect and would love to work with folks. You can also find additional resources on our website at teamheller.com. But thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to our excellent and engaged audience for showing up for this. Thank you so much. And shout out and many thanks to Jeff, Jett, and Kaya from Food for the Poor and Heller Consulting. Just a reminder that this webinar series needs your voice. You can help us improve this vital resource for the NetHope community by filling out our satisfaction survey. The link to the survey will appear when the Zoom window closes in a new tab in your browser. And it will also be in our follow-up email and on the webinar landing page at nethope.org. Speaking of that follow-up email, it will be coming your way in the next few hours with links to the webinar recording, the slides, and other resources shared during today's presentation and discussion. And on behalf of our presenters and NetHope, we wish you a great rest of your day wherever you are in our wide world. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.